This is the Race on ENCA, examining trends and sentiment in key provinces and what the new ANC leadership in 2018 has to get to grips with. We're joined now by commentator Karima Brown, reporter Nicolaus Bauer, along with Lumkile Monde. Now, Karima, let's pick up on what we were talking about in the first segment of the program. Often Lumkile was saying the political relationship between constituents and politicians exists at local level and not at national level. In fact, many people don't see national leaders as instantly recognizable. Should we be surprised?
No, not at all. I think that municipal government is, where the tire hits the tar. It's the coalface. It's where most people interface with government and with services. And in a country such as ours, where you have deep inequality and poverty, where a lot of those services are being, distributed there, it's not surprising at all. In fact, the fact that provincial government leaders aren't that recognizable is an indication of something that even ANC members and its allies have also realized. Many have asked whether we actually need provincial government in its current form. And of course, when the constitution was negotiated, it was parties like the IFP and the DA that was pushing for a federal state. The ANC was very set on South Africa being a unitary state. But I bet you, Jeremy, if you try and dismantle those provinces today, it will be the ANC premiers that will give you the biggest opposition, because you have patronage networks at work from there.
Nicolaus, you work the story at the coalface. You're out at rallies, you're talking to people, you're talking to constituents. The disconnect that we're referring to here, do you actually see that?
Well, indeed, just to echo Karima's sentiment there, the ANC member on the ground, his first point of call is his branch chairperson, and then of course maybe the regional chairperson, and then depending on how deep his contacts or his or her contacts run in the party, that may extend up to a little bit of a broader leadership, maybe the provincial executive, and quite possibly even the person that runs the province. But national leaders, there is a disconnect between the people on the ground and those that occupy the highest positions of authority in the South African government and in the party that runs the state, the ANC.
We're going to put up a quote from one of the focus group respondents in just a moment. But before we talk about that, Lumkile, do you think that that disconnect that we're talking about is perhaps more pronounced now than it has been in the past as far as the ANC is concerned?
I think with the upheaval and the war of movement within the ANC, clearly it looks as though it's becoming more sharper and more pronounced, because there's been a re-emergence of new people that many people didn't know before 1994. So with the generation gap happening, there is that happening much faster than it was before, when the leaders before 94 were known and could be identifiable.
Karima, look at that, and it's the last line that is of interest. Things were better when Mandela was president, essentially, is the sentiment there. But don't people the world over always hark back to political past? I mean, I've heard the same thing said, for instance, of the George Bush presidency in America.
Look, absolutely. Nostalgia is a big part of the way in which people experience reality. And of course, with nostalgia, you can conjure up an imaginary past that didn't really exist. And
the airbrush effect.
Precisely. And if you talk to young people, they will tell you that the deal that Nelson Mandela negotiated didn't go far enough. What about the land question? It's interesting that that quote comes from someone who's 40 plus, and that talks about that generation gap. The average South African voter is going to be under the age of 36. That's a young person. This is not a sentiment that is consistent with that person. That's the sentiment that we saw, let's say, during Fees Must Fall. But it's interesting that this sentiment comes out in ANC branches, because it tells you whether or not ANC branches are in fact reflective of the younger generation. And of course, that is a challenge for any party who wants to remain in power.
It's an interesting one, Nicolaus. Have you seen that reminiscence factor when you've been in the field?
It's not a case of what's happened, it's a case of what is going to happen moving forward. Bread and butter issues that affect people now, not what the ANC did prior 1994 and 1994 to perhaps 2008, 2014 and beyond. It's about what is going to happen in South Africa, what is the ANC going to do in order to cure the ills of society. So yes, certainly the ANC brand, I would say with the people that I interact with on the ground, remains extremely strong, but it's about what is going to happen going forward. It's a great history of O.R. Tambo, Nelson Mandela and the like, but is it going to solve the problems that South Africa faces today? That's the average ANC member that I interact with on the ground, especially younger people perhaps from my generation.
One of the other things that have come out of these focus groups is corruption. I want to get to that in just a moment. But very quickly, an answer from both of you. If this disconnect exists, Remember, we're looking at this in terms of national leadership as far as the party is concerned. Lumkile, what do those vying for the presidency in this race need to do to fix it?
Well, they need to build unity at the top. The fact that there are about 5 or 6 people standing for presidency indicates that it's going to be a tough time for the leadership, but also for the people on the ground on who to choose. So what people tend to do, they choose the brand, not the individual.
Karima, how do they fix it?
I think it's really interesting what Lumkile is saying, because just this morning we were watching video clips of one of the kind of strong men in the ANC at the moment, Sihle Zikalala, the provincial chair in KwaZulu-Natal. And of course he spoke out against brandishing T-shirts of individuals, saying we are not an organization of individuals, we are a collective, we don't join a party of so-and-so, we join the African National Congress. But I would suggest, Jeremy, that that is an attempt to impose an identity on the ANC. The fact that there are in fact campaigns with campaign managers, that there are 7 candidates, tells you that that idea of collective leadership is an invoked one when it's convenient. People are actually following individual leaders. If you look at someone's popularity versus that of his party, someone like Olumisa, for example, extremely popular individual leader, but the UDM doing really poorly. South Africans do like big man politics. All our opposition parties are personified by these huge individuals. Helen Zille in the past, Patricia de Lille in the past, Buthelezi in the past and present. And I think that that's the tension. The ANC would like to have collective leadership. The reality is that President Jacob Zuma, as a leader, has impacted as an individual on perceptions on the party.
I want to pick up on that word unity, and yes. Nicholas, you can put this up. We'll put another quote up on our big screen here. One of the ways in which the party might coalesce and achieve greater unity would be to rid the organization of corruption. When you're talking to people, are you sensing that corruption is a common thread? It's a common concern?
Well, certainly it's definitely the levels of anger against corruption, in my experience, have been felt more in rural areas where government, the ANC-led government, is by and large the main employer in areas where there isn't a lot of development. And as this quote says here, you need to do certain things to get your foot in the door, to get the tender, to get the business, to put food on the table for your family. And there's a growing discontent. And while you're talking about unity within the ANC, by and large, the people that I speak to that are part of the ANC, be they branch members in Saxonwold or Parkhurst down the road, or be they branch members in Mansfield, Soweto, or Khayelitsha elsewhere, maybe down in the Western Cape, there is this growing concern that corruption has become endemic. It's become a cultural problem within the ANC. So there is unity around certain issues, corruption being one of them.
Karima, Lumkile, I'll get your views on corruption and unity in just a moment. And when the race continues, we know then what the big provincial issues are. How then do aspirant leaders going forward have to deal with them? This is The Race.